I've got a little confession to make. I have not played a video game since the early 90s when my brother and I were playing Duck Hunt quite addictively. But I am in the flow of institutional money, and what I'm starting to see is a lot of interest in the sector of e-gaming and some big check writing that's going on. So in Toronto and right here in Vancouver, there's been a couple of family offices that have recently written pretty big checks to buy teams, Overwatch. And so I think we really need to pay attention to this space. I've got a panel here of people who know a lot more about this than I do. But just to put the industry in perspective, it's now bigger than Hollywood. It's bigger than the music industry, and last year about $1 billion was spent by Fortune 500 companies on advertising in the space. And right now, as I'm speaking, there's a 27-year-old guy named Ninja who is making $500,000 a month playing a game called Fortnite with people like Drake, and his audience is the size, about a third the size of Canada. So these are big numbers. This is it's a fun sector, and let's get started. So the goal of the panel is to find out exactly what e-gaming is, why should we care about it, and how we're going to make money off of it. So I think all the panelists have already been introduced. We'll start off with Dan Sybak. So he is building the first e-gaming stadium in Canada. Very exciting. So you know a lot about this industry. We were talking backstage, and you know the lay of the land. So can you tell the audience about the different parts of it, like the tournaments, the stadiums, the advertising? Like, just walk us through.
Absolutely. So the thing about esports is there's cultures within cultures of the games. And so while you have world tournaments that sell out, like we saw Rogers Arena, League of Legends just did their North American championships, and that sold out the arena, Oracle Arena down in San Francisco, or I guess it's San Jose. But within that, you've got smaller subcultures for each game. And so some events can draw as small as like 50 people, and some events can draw as much as 500-600 individuals.
And people come dressed in costumes, or, you know, and let's bring Julia Becker into the conversation as well. She's head of IR for Enthusiast Gaming, which is a company going public very soon. There's like a whole cult aspect to this stuff, right? Kids in their basement drinking Red Bull, addicted to games, wearing costumes, going out. Like, let's talk about the kind of the perspective from the gamer. Mm-hmm.
So just to put some numbers in perspective right now, there's approximately 2.3 billion gamers worldwide. So this isn't something new. I just think that this is something that's now being tapped into. A lot of these gamers come together and feel connected with one another based on the games they're playing, the consoles that they're playing on. It's almost that social acceptance that they're looking for. So a lot of the gamers in this community of authentic gamers, are feeling supported, and that's why they're die-hard fans. And you're seeing all of these die-hard fans come together and interact on, Fortnite, for example, or eSports is another big one that's coming into light right now as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff also has to do with the online streaming, mm-hmm. right? So Twitch is a big hub for this stuff. And so, like, why are people actually watching other people play games? Like, why is this happening exactly?
If I can answer that, I think it's the social interaction with it. And I think that's what investors, advertisers, sponsors, they're trying to understand that. They don't understand that. You mentioned Ninja. The reason people watch Ninja is because he makes it fun. They love what they're doing. And they're able to actually chat and talk about things that come up. So someone will say something witty, and everybody will catch on to that, and they'll repeat it, and it'll, drive up on that chat. And so it's that interaction that gets people involved and want to watch him.
Yeah, and we'll bring Sam Chandola into this conversation. He's been a video game developer for over 15 years, so he knows the space well. So
I just want to add to what he said about, why are people watching this? Think about, why do people watch football or basketball or baseball? It's fun to watch. It's a social experience. You can trash talk the other team. Each one of those points is valid with esports as well. right? It's just a different generation that maybe grew up as much on football as they did on Madden, which is a game by EA, which is a massive esports as well, and they just feel the same level of connection, resonance, and the scale at which you can do it is much larger because you're not confined by a physical space or a physical arena. You can have millions of people watching simultaneously and playing with you simultaneously as well, and that's a different experience altogether.
Yeah, and there's a lot of money being spent within the games, right? So I was talking to one of my girlfriends who's got, 4 kids addicted to Fortnite, and she says they spend more money on what are called skins. I guess you can dress up your characters in these funny outfits, and you can, put skins on your guns and things like that. So they're spending more money on this than their actual real clothes. So yeah, Julia, can you enlighten us on this?
Yeah, so our platform with Enthusiast Gaming, we're a content platform for the authentic gamer. And what we're seeing in terms of a demographic is predominantly male, 18 to 34, spending 10 plus hours a week playing games or being involved in gaming activities, reading content. And more importantly, the disposable income of these individuals is much higher than the average person or the average that we've seen in previous target markets. Now, why is this important? I mean, if they have more money to spend, they're going to be spending that on skins, on games, on new consoles, or any other activities like that.
If I can, just to help relate this, for an individual plays hockey and there are always new skates, there's always new sticks, it helps you improve your game. That's what skins are. It isn't just the physical skin, it's the abilities and how that makes you a better player and your team a better team. And so now I can take that in and become better or stay at the top because I continue to buy these skins.
For a lot of people who think, why would somebody spend money on something virtual in a game? The analogy I always give is, if you play any sport, I snowboard. I spend money every year on my snowboarding equipment, on my gear, because it's my hobby. And that's what esports has become for a lot of people. It's become a hobby. And once it's a hobby, it's much more comfortable to spend money in it because it's providing you hours and hours of entertainment. Still more economical than spending $15 on a movie ticket that'll last you 3 hours or 1.5 to 2 hours. $15 in a game could provide you a month's worth of entertainment.
And that makes sense. Let's bring Darius into the conversation because he's been involved in esports via the blockchain through Fans Unite. So another layer to this whole thing, not only are people spending money on skins, but there's a betting industry within the skins industry. So then people are placing bets on skins that Ninja will be wearing during his game. So Darius, if you could talk to us about the kind of sports betting and betting side of the whole gaming industry.
Yeah, the esports betting kind of opened our eyes a few years ago when it started becoming the fastest growing kind of sport that was bet on our site. And then we kind of talked to other sports books and they were seeing the same thing, so much volume coming in on esports betting. And I think it was interesting because a few years ago, I think the actual bettors were a lot of the gamers who knew more about the teams and the players and the strategy and the actual events going on than the actual sports books. So there's a lot of money to be made early on. Now, of course, the sports books have caught up and the lines are pretty efficient, but there's tons of volume and it's definitely the fastest growing sport.
And is it legal betting?
In legal jurisdictions, yeah, it is.
Yeah. So people are betting on these games and the success of these games, and it can be a bit fickle. So let's talk about the reality versus sort of the short-term nature of some of the excitement around the game. So I don't know if you remember a few years ago, Candy Crush went public. It was overhyped, multi-billion-dollar IPO, was later taken private by Activision, I believe, well below the IPO price. So, for me as an investor, if I put my investor hat on, I have trouble kind of putting my eggs in one team's basket because I wouldn't know enough about it to make an educated bet. So, Sam, maybe you can enlighten us on this because you've been in video game development. What are the kind of things you're looking for that will make a game successful?
Let's start with Candy Crush. You're right, King IPO'd, they massively overvalued themselves, Activision came in and acquired them. To put things in context though, Candy Crush is still grossing $4 million a day.
How much? $4 million?
$4 million a day.
They make $4 million a day?
In top line revenues from that one product, right? So the product's still making money, it's just that the other economics and how they were valuing it was different. Video games development is a risky business. It is an extremely lucrative business, but you really need to know what you are doing. The reality is that the business model has changed and is changing on a daily basis. We used to have big console PC titles, took 5 years of development. Now it's all mobile, it's free to play, there's different mechanics that you're thinking about. It's evolved from a hit-driven business to a software as a service business if you're doing it right. It's all about growing your user base. It's about monetizing them on a daily basis. And we're talking monetizing, it's a term we call ARPDAU, average revenue per daily active user. We want that to be 10 cents or 15 cents, but we have 5 million daily active users, right? So now every day we're getting 10 cents from 5 million users on average, and we keep scaling that user base. It is difficult. You have to really... It is a very interesting expression I read from actually venture capitalists who said back in the day, you had to crash a fighter pilot before you made any good investments. And the idea was a fighter pilot plane costs around $25 million. So you have to burn $25 million before you actually start seeing a return. Gaming is kind of like that. You don't have to burn $25 million, but you have had to have made mistakes. And you have to know what works in the industry, what does not work. How do you actually make a good, compelling loop to get players to keep coming back? How do you actually scale and market that? Because different products appeal to different audiences, right? Lifetime value of a user might be $5, $6, $7. So you have to keep the cost of acquisition to $2 or $3 to make it work. It's possible, but it's tough. You really need to work with the right people who have been in the industry for a while and kind of work with them. It's a long answer, but just talking about esports specifically, if you're a game developer and you're looking to make an esports, there's a couple of things you need to be very cognizant of. One, it has to be fair. Games have a tendency where if I'm a higher level than you are, then I have more powers and advantages than you do. That doesn't make a good esport at all. Two, it has to be fun to watch, not just fun to play. And every esport that you can look at right now, Dota, Counter-Strike, PUBG, Fortnite, they're all extremely fun games to watch for players who are actually not participating. And that's super important to keep in mind as you're making your product as well. And then the last point that I think is pretty important to consider as well is that the community decides if you're an esport. You don't go out and saying, I'm making an esports game. All the current popular esports that we have right now started off as mods to existing games. And by a mod, I mean the game was already very popular. Some modders came together, said, let's change the rules a little bit. And they made a new version of a game. And the community adopted it. And that's how it grew. Dota came from a mod of Warcraft 3. PUBG came from a mod of Arma 3. League of Legends copied Dota 2. They're all evolving from existing games as opposed to saying, I'm going to make an esport. And then you go from there.
I just want to talk about the investor side too, because we raised 6 figures to get ourselves going in that, and it's in its infancy, esports still. Like it's probably at the toddler phase now. Would you agree with that? So it's starting to walk, and people are trying to figure out as an investor, well, how do I get into this, or what kind of return can I expect? That is a challenge because of all the different cultures in it. You're trying to figure out, and especially for sponsors, okay, how do we reach this demographic of 18 to 38? And as an investor, how do I get that return back? So I can't stress enough what he said about nurturing the local cultures for each different game. As in Canada, 19 million identify as gamers, but all 19 million don't play Fortnite. They don't play League of Legends, all of them. Dota. Again, Dota sold out, but there's a big chunk that didn't care and didn't want to go because that's not their game. And so that's where investors need to be educated and need to give more than 5 minutes to look at and maybe start to understand why an investment may or may not be for them.
Right, and I think if you look at some of the public companies like Cineplex, for example, so many people in this room might not know this, but they bought a company, I think it was about 6 years ago, called Virgin Gaming. Virgin Gaming was, it had all the hopes and dreams of e-gaming. I think it was a bit early. My friend Rob Siegel, he built it, and he eventually sold it to Cineplex, but they had raised a lot of money on Bay Street, around $100 million valuation, and I think Cineplex bought it for about $15 million. But Cineplex is now rolling out these rec rooms across Canada because they realize that there's 2 things, I think, going on. One, like what you guys are talking about, fostering the culture in the community, and people want to not just play online, but they want to see each other. But I think there's a technology issue, I was reading about this, where some of the gaming has to actually be done in these stadiums, because if there's any latency in the connection, you can lose or gain an edge. So is that what's going on?
Yeah, 100%. So, and I don't mean to dominate, but as we roll out our stadiums, connectivity is a huge thing. So for, again, the tournament that they had here, the ping rate was 5. That's like almost instantaneous reactions to what they do. And to really help you understand professional players' heart rates when they're at the peak of their performance, it's the same heart rate as a NASCAR driver as he's doing his thing. So the players are going and going and going. They need that to be correct. So a player at home that gets a ping rate of, say, 20, well, that's great. That's really strong. But when it drops below that to, say, 30 to 40 frames per second on a ping, all of a sudden there's lag, and you know, the teams that, oh, why is this happening? And that's where the frustration comes in, which is why, as a panel, we know that we have to connect these players, get them into local teams, and nurture them along that way.
Sounds like these players shouldn't be on too much Red Bull, and maybe they should be taking some CBD
Sleep.
or some calming
get some
agents.
I've been playing I used to play professionally since 2005, and infrastructure back then was not as good as infrastructure is right now. And I cannot tell you the number of computers that have been broken because somebody's match got disconnected.
Because what, sorry?
Somebody got disconnected from the middle of a match, right? And that's the last thing you want when you're doing well, you're on top, you're crushing the other team, and suddenly there's a disconnection issue that has crushed dreams and
Someone's
hopes.
going to be in big trouble.
It's made a lot of people very angry. It's much better now. We were at the International, actually, the Dota 2 Championship that happened in Vancouver, and their infrastructure was amazing, making sure that there was no ping reduction, there was no loss, that nobody ever had any disconnection issues. Yeah.
So let's talk about what everybody here really came to hear about, and that's how are we all going to invest in this space and make money? What are the vehicles that are available right now to invest in gaming? And I'm going to bring Darius into this conversation. It's probably the best question, but the hardest to answer. So, like, what companies right now are public? You're coming at it from the blockchain side, so there might be some, blockchain companies participating in the space. Are there funds that have been launched? Like, how do we invest here?
Well, I think the best way to make money is just invest with Dan and Julia and Sam here. And I'll kind of answer that question in a bit of a roundabout way, because in our space, in the blockchain and crypto space, it's about this time last year where there was so much hype in the space, and a lot of people were blindly investing into so many different cryptos and tokens and kind of the blockchain stocks. And unfortunately, during the crash, a lot of people were left holding the bag. So I think it was, kind of the investment fundamentals that people weren't really following. They weren't looking at, the company, whether they were solving a real world problem, the teams and their ability to execute. So I think it really does come down to fundamentals. Because obviously, gaming and esports, there's a lot of hype around it right now, and I think for good reason. It's a massive market, it's an emerging market, so there's a lot of opportunities to make money. In regards to like companies that are actually doing this, honestly, like Julia's company, they're going public next week?
Sometime next week.
We can't say that.
Yeah.
Soon. Sorry.
Next couple weeks.
So I think there are a lot of opportunities in Canada. We just closed a private placement a couple of weeks ago with Fans Unite. We're going public in 2019. Hopefully early 2019 is the goal. So there are a lot of opportunities, and there's so much money being poured into the market that there's so much innovation coming out and so much new technology. I think there's a really good opportunity.
And there's so Victory Square, which is a sponsor here at the conference, and Sam, I believe you sold one of your companies to them, and Darius, you're involved. So they're kind of like a publicly traded, I guess, investment fund, and they've got some e-gaming exposure, so that would be a way to play it? Yeah.
So both Sam and I sold our companies to Victory Square. So obviously the answer is a little bit biased, but I think they're doing a lot of cool things. They have assets and incubating companies in a lot of different industries, from blockchain to cannabis to gaming, AR, VR, health, film. So they're a publicly traded investment vehicle. I think they have about 20 companies in their portfolio now. Doing really, really cool things. A lot of the companies are now kind of taken off, so that's definitely a company I'd be watching.
And Julia, Enthusiast Gaming, I mean, it's probably so they're a client of mine, and Julia's, full disclosure, so we're a bit biased, but the reason I really like this company is because it's game agnostic. So they're an online, they own 80 websites that have publishing content on e-gaming. So if you want to find out about what's the hottest game, you go on there. The way they make money is through advertising. So they have big programmatic advertising, it was what they call it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you're not betting on one game, you're betting on all of them.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of advertising, great point, Jen. We're generating on a bad day probably 1 billion ad requests per week. The industry is growing significantly. I think I read a report by 2021, it looks like the industry is going to be $180 billion. We're just getting started. You're going to see a lot more companies trying to come into gaming or esports through whatever vehicle it is. And like any investment, I think it's really important to do your due diligence. Look at the management, look at the milestones that the company has hit to date and what they're planning to do moving forward. And just, make sure you talk about those investments and just don't jump into one or another. Make sure you're making good decisions.
If I may as well, so I think the best way how investors can probably invest in the sector is by hedging their bets. I think individual investments into specific companies are great, but if you don't have that industry insight into esports, I think emergence of funds that are focusing on esports or incubators that are focusing on esports is going to be something that probably the industry will gravitate towards, and probably in the next 6 to 8 months we'll see a lot more of those coming up as well. Yeah. Right now I'm working with GoLeague, which is also we're actually platform game agnostic as well, and we're building out a poker style tournament where gamers can actually come play their favorite games and win real cash. But I do believe that we'll see a little bit more incubators and funds emerging, or if they're not emerging, they need to emerge to make smart decisions into the sector.
And I also wanted to talk about the current investors model in that, as people have seen, people are putting big money into some pro teams or into gamers, and what they're kind of not seeing is that it's about growing that investment versus the esports, but that's changing. And I think that's important, that there are so many different investment models that are going to come along. So I can't stress enough what Julia said about you've got to do the research to understand that, because, for example, Aquilini's buying Overwatch. It isn't just for Vancouver. They own the whole Pacific Northwest and Hawaii. So if Seattle or Portland wants to buy an Overwatch team, they will have to pay the Aquilinis for the rights to do that. They're probably not going to give it for $1. So it's really important to just understand on an investment side, if you're going to do this, you need to understand what they're trying to accomplish and then put the money there if you feel safe with it.
Dan, I don't know if you knew the cost to get an Overwatch team right now is $20 million.
Yeah. And they paid 50.
Yeah. But
Sorry, what? It's 20 million and
but they paid 50.
But they paid 50.
Yeah.
And that also, well, I don't know about their deal, but I know in Toronto, I think that deal for the Overwatch team is going to come to market, meaning they're going to raise equity to pay for the team. Like they put a lead order in, but I think there's probably a deal coming. But it brings up a good point for people in the room that may have retail advisors. Most retail advisors and portfolio managers in Canada who manage like the big amounts of money would be in their 60s. And the problem with that is their kids would be in their 20s and probably not gamers. So gamers are actually the demographic below that. So it's possible that a lot of these money managers are not paying attention and are missing this. So it would be your responsibility to kind of nudge them. And as Peter Lynch, who was the greatest investor at Fidelity of all times, ask your own kids, like, what are they doing? Where are they spending their money? Like, watch their bank accounts and ask them what's cool. And then Dan, so you have a private company, right? Are you planning to tap the public equity markets at any point?
I think at some point we will, but we have a plan. We know what we're doing. Our goal is to build 5 of these stadiums across Canada by year 7. We will probably have an announcement in the next few weeks about our second stadium that we will be building as well. But again, our goal is to help the sponsors to reach this target audience. Our goal is to be an esports rec center that's going to allow players to come and for drop-ins. So just to give you a good story here, as we were getting the jerseys for these teams together and we're meeting with our vendor there, he was like, oh yeah, I got 5 buddies. I'd love to come and play Dota 2 there. I'd put $800 in to play a season, no problem. Like it was no sell, because the age group and what they want to do is just go and play the games and have fun with it. but feel like they're not going to get attacked, like it can happen. And so for us, yeah, at some point we will, but we need to make sure that it's that the plan is solidly in place.
And that's a great point. Like these stadiums, like the rec room and also what you're building, are becoming kind of community centers. Like Julie and I are planning a launch party for Enthusiast Gaming, and the rec room in Toronto, which is right beside the Sky Dome, which I didn't even know about until last week, the Leafs are renting it out for their home opener. So after their home opener, they're throwing a big party there. And like I've had some friends on Bay Street who tell me they go there and go on dates and stuff to like hang out. But sorry, Julie.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that ties back to, the audience that is the authentic gamer. They're finding these platforms, whether it be content or playing their favorite game or now live streaming their favorite gamer, to feel interacted with and socially accepted. So the Rec Room, EGLX, stadiums are now physical platforms where this audience can go and meet face to face. Like-minded conversations happen, they play their games, they hang out, and that's their social community. So this entire demographic really is a community. And what's interesting about this community when it comes to esports is, so we know that the gaming demographic is already die-hard fans, and now you bring localized teams like sports teams into it. I'm a Vancouver Canucks fan. If you're in Toronto, you're probably a Blue Jays fan. So now it's adding that aspect of die-hard fan with local support, and I think you're going to see a lot more coming out of that localized support from an advertising perspective, from sponsorship. Apparel companies are now jumping on board, and it's, again, we're just getting started in terms of where it's going to go.
And Halloween's right around the corner, and I think a lot of people would like to dress up as their favorite gaming team or avatar or whatnot. I want to encourage everybody, if you're going to be in Toronto on October 26th and 27th, EGLX is the biggest gaming expo in Canada. Again, I did not know about this gaming expo till last month. They had 25,000 people come out last year. Apparently it's going to be 50,000 this year.
At the Toronto Metro Convention Center.
Yeah, at the Toronto Convention Center. I will be there. Probably not in costume yet. Maybe that'll be for next year. But I would invite you all to come. And anything else? I think we've got 29 seconds here.
Yeah, just real quick, I just want to piggyback what she said about the culture too. Players, like we talked about skins, again, Ninja, he gets a huge portion of what he makes from the fans. They'll donate $5, $10, $15, $25. So now you mentioned he has, how many?
Like 10 million
viewers.
10 million followers.
So again, on a daily basis, if you get just a slight percentage of that, donating $5 to $10.
I think the last thing I can say, because the Dota 2 championship that happened right now in Vancouver, prize pool was $25 million. 23 million came from fans, and that's important. Mm-hmm. And the final stat, League of Legends, which is a popular esport, there were 5 million more viewers for the League of Legends Finals Championship last year than the NBA Finals.
Yeah.
Right, and I think that speaks to something.
That's amazing. And final stat, Ninja recently went on his honeymoon, and he had not been on vacation for 8 years. So just be careful not to get too addicted to this stuff. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.